If we are going to take a pulse at the motives, you're 73 years old. And so if we look at that demographic of that, so I'll ask you to take a shot at what you see the motives are. And obviously you've got your own life. Your motives are not the same as everyone else. You're not always in the same, not everybody's in the same demographic. But if we take an aspiring person like what listens to this show, what listens to your show, who reads your books, and say, what do you see as the kind of paramount motives up to your stage of life?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, in terms of the American dream, it's pretty clear to get a job, grind it out, don't worry too much about enjoying it, but look at creating enough of a financial base to get to the point where you can quit the stinking job and then enjoy life. That's it. That's pretty simplistic. That's a brief overview.
Okay, well, that you just gave a cultural overview. So now compare that to where you see a lot of your peers, who I'm going to put in the bookshelves that we have behind us, the speakers, the influencers, the experts, the leaders who have more aspiration than the norm. I know that that's, some people can hear that and take offense, but again, nobody's listening to this show for entertainment purposes. They'd be over at NPR or wherever doing that. If so, they're here to learn and grow. So of the learning growth minded, let's do that. The Carol Dweck, not the fixed mindset, not the survival mode, but the growth minded, the abundant minded people. How do you see the motive differ through life and come to your point? Because that was not your trajectory, what you just explained.
No, not at all. And still isn't. And there is a growing number of people who have a much different perspective. They realize that American dream is pretty shallow. And especially when they get to that point where they have enough money to meet their own needs. And then they discover that that's a pretty meaningless life, to get up every morning and have no purpose. So yeah, there are people who are saying this is a different continuum. I want to continue to have meaning in my life, even if I have enough money to take care of my own needs. And fortunately so. I mean, because if we really take that first perspective where I want to get enough money to meet my own needs, that's a very self-centered, greedy kind of perspective, to just think I want to have enough to take care of me, heck with everybody
Yeah.
else. It just in terms of stewardship, however you define that word, but having the responsibility to use gifts that you have well, it implies continuing to do so, even if the resources gained from that just flow through you to be used in other, meaningful ways. So there has to be, but what it really has to be is that continuing sense of purpose.
Well, yeah, it was impacting to me in my late 20s, maybe, when somebody posed a question. It probably came from a book, maybe something that, and I've read it before. Hopefully everybody's encountered at some point, to say, what would you be doing right now if there was whatever amount of money in the bank? Wake up
Yeah.
tomorrow morning, there's $10 million, just enough that you can put it in an investment and live off six figures just from that money. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, what would you do? And how disappointing if it would be something drastically different than what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real test. If you're no longer scrambling for money, would you continue doing what you're doing? Now, interestingly, I mean, you're younger than I am, obviously, but we're seeing people in your generation or even younger who, because of all the varied work models, some of them are hitting that point where they've taken care of all their financial needs, in their 30s and 40s. And then it raises an interesting question. What do I do to continue a meaningful life if I'm no longer scrambling? If that's not the
Mm.
primary focus for me anymore, it's just making enough money to keep groceries on the table. I met with a young entrepreneur not too long ago who had done exactly that. I had met with him about 3 years prior and looked at where he was. He was a kind of a rising star in what he was doing. And we looked at what would it take to get him to a point where he would really be set financially. Well, what happened is he did that. He did that. And then he called me and says, "Can we have lunch? I need to pick your brain." I said, "Sure." So he did. He said, "What we projected happened almost exactly." And he said, "I'm at a point now," he was in his late 30s, And he said, my fear is I'm going to screw this up. He said, what do I need to do to make sure I don't screw my life up? Because I'm not getting up every morning now and just thinking about how can I create another buck. That's not, he said, I've lost that as motivation. And his fear was that he was going to screw things up and sabotage the other parts of his life.
Obviously, if when we're talking about where you are at your stage of life, 73, when I looked up retirement, not that this is a show about retirement specifically, but when I looked that up, most all the commentary is in regards to finances.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Americans did. I think I saw the average was 62 at some point. Now it's 66. It keeps creeping up because they do not have enough money to retire. And it's obviously a flip-flop economy when I look at you, when I look at Zig Ziglar, and he was an outspoken, as you are, against retirement. Why would I ever retire from what? The only thing you would retire from is that thing that you are tired from doing. But you mentioned the magic word of purpose. So I look again at where I am today, and I am not at a place where I can just stop where I don't need money again, where I don't need income. But if it all disappeared, one of my kids asked that. One of your grandkids asked that recently. He said, "Daddy, how many?" He said, "That was Dakota." He said, "How much money would you have if you didn't have all those kids?"
Oh my gosh, that's interesting.
and the first thought is, well, a truckload more. But in truth, knowing me, I'd be out doing adventures and running and riding, making less because I didn't need to make so much.
Yeah.
And that's not a good or bad or right or wrong, but that's more my propensity. But to look at that, and still it comes back to, if I didn't have the kids, if the money was in the bank, what would I do? I would just do ever more of what I am currently doing, which I don't know anything else, because I grew up in the economy of you and mom and doing something that mattered to you and whatnot. So now here you are, 73, and you mentioned that you guys are in a new place here in Florida, which of course everybody thinks of, oh, you retired to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in an area, you're in a cul-de-sac here. And I think you said everybody but one person is kind of officially retired. Something like that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and so here you are. And well, how do you answer that though? Because could you be retired?
Theoretically,
Well,
I could,
but then if it's not
if,
but then what would you do?
that just conjures up all kinds of confusion for me to frame it as such. What would that mean? Because we're back to, why would I stop doing what I'm doing, even if money is no longer the primary objective? Here's the deal. When people hit retirement, we often see them deteriorate physically
Totally.
very quickly.
Or I've said that what's amazed me is you take the hot shot executive, or you, you've written book, done all this stuff, and then you just quit. You don't have to. And then all of a sudden you're like volunteering at Habitat for Humanity because you're just bored out of your skull. You're not proud of what you're doing.
At Walmart. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're bored out of your skull.
Yeah.
Not really proud of that, but you have nothing to do.
Well, when people hit that age, and we often see the 65-year-old who they have a going away party and gets a gold watch and he's set financially, and 2 years later he's dead. It's like, what's up with that? There was no reason for that, but he deteriorated because we have to have, at that stage of life, friends, money, and purpose. And a lot of people hit that stage, at critical stage, where they have friends and they have money. Wow, you lose a purpose. You just told your body, I don't need you anymore. I'm done.
Well, so think of some of your peers, whether you want to name them or not, give a name if you want, or just, somebody, who you would say, let's go away from the money. Let's assume that most of them can retire in their 70s.
Right.
Most of them can. And most everybody, I assume, could financially. Of the ones, I mean, ultimately we want purpose. And what's the product of that? Is fulfillment. We want fulfillment. We want a day that we're happy to wake up to, that we have something to look forward to, that we have some meaning. We're back to purpose. What are some of the people, like depict some of the people that, what are they doing? What are they doing in that frame of the ones that you see finding fulfillment, as opposed to what we just talked about?
Well, here where I live, there are people who play golf every day. I mean, that's a big deal. And so that's seen as filling that gap.
I would say that's fun. That's pleasure. It's still not purpose.
Well, that's where they struggle.
We're back to the Christian thing of, get all your points, go to heaven, be on a cloud and sing hymns for 1,000 years. And it sounds horrific. For the love of God, give me a mountain to climb or some kind of a challenge. I mean, to me, it goes counter to the essence of humanity, which none of us can say exactly what that is. We all want to define that, but so I'm going to say that's fun and play.
Okay. There are people here who volunteer a lot. My next door neighbor, drives a Porsche convertible, has a Tesla in the garage as well, and an SUV, but he volunteers in the cardiology department of our local hospital. Very worthy thing to do. It's a for-profit hospital.
Yeah, and I don't need to downplay that. I didn't mean to do that at all with.
All right. But he finds purpose in that because he's been through some struggles in his own heart condition. So he does that. That gives him, so people do try to find things that align with their own life experiences sometimes, and they find things that give them a sense of purpose.
Okay, let me come at it a different angle then. We had the discussion also recently in talking about this of the concept of would you rather, let's take the money question, the $5 million windfall, however much money that is that you're going to have in 2 years. Would you rather just win that? It falls out of the sky, lands in your doorstep, you get it by the lottery, or would you have it come from an idea you had, a business you developed, an art piece you created, music you composed, whatever it is, something that you did, a book you wrote? Would you rather have that? And most people who, again, I'm going to put the aspiring crowd who have experienced the jubilation of overcoming and achieving something would say, oh, I'd rather earn it, is what I'm going to say, than just get it given to them. You're 73. How much does, even if it's not financial challenge, but you're involved in enough and have purpose that you have challenge. I mean, you have days where you have to deal with difficult things. Yes. Whether the relationships or.
Oh yeah. But I create challenges for myself.
Okay.
If it is in books or speaking or coaching or growing an online community, I mean, I create challenges because that does get me up in the morning.
Yeah. That's what I was picking at.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I create those even if not necessary, because that does motivate me to get up and do something, to prove that I'm, still in the game, to prove that I can accomplish, that I can climb that mountain, so to speak. I love that. I have no desire to be walking down the sidewalk and kick a paper bag and open it up and find that $5 million in there. I'd feel like it was tainted, even if it was determined to be rightfully mine. I would feel awkward about that. I'd probably look for ways to give it away because it doesn't connect with how I want to live.
Well, and you have the people who are guilty because of the money that they have now, that they don't want anybody to pick because they inherited it. Or, yeah.
Well, and those people, and what we find with those, now, I don't know if you want to go down this rabbit trail, we find people who inherited money, they tend to be terrified,
hold on to
that
it. Yeah.
Somebody else is going to get it. They don't want somebody to walk in their yard for fear that they're going to twist their ankle and sue them. They have that kind of mentality. Whereas people who earned it legitimately tend to be extremely generous.
I was going to say, there's probably a great stat there of like, you could probably do some church stat of tithing from those who inherited money and those who did not. Well, I'm intrigued by the idea of challenge, even when we look at, so what's the I mean, somebody who golfs is going to say they're challenged, but they're getting up to have fun and pleasure. So I'm admittedly poking here. So I'm biasedly poking to get to a point or to have a discussion and try to figure out what is going to, I want to be 73, 83 and looking forward to life and challenge. When Zig Ziglar fell, he was 80 something when he had a head injury. And it kind of sped forward some dementia issues, but the diagnosis was keep him going, keep him writing, keep him talking. That's what gives him joy. He's going to decline. And they did that till, the end of his days. So when you look at pleasure and fun and playing golf, not a lot of true challenge. And I'm going to say a little bit there with volunteering, I'm going to assume, you go there and you give of your abundance, but it's not a whole lot of challenge. Now, we don't want to go over here and manifest trial and tribulation necessarily, but like you said, you can. So how do you do that? I mean, you did have a real health scare a year ago now. Is it longer than
Oh,
that?
it's longer than that, about 3 years ago
Oh
now.
goodness, 3 years ago, and you had the challenge of overcoming
Mhm.
that, and it left you super inspired. And that's when you were saying, maybe that's it. You had just turned 70, 71. And you said, man, I'm excited. I'm reborn again, and I'm planning out the next 20 years of my life
Absolutely.
out of that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you've got book deals, things that are happening that you've got deadlines to do. That I could hear somebody saying, "Oh my gosh, man, I spent 50 years doing that. I'm tired of having those, and
Oh
now I'm going to
my.
go play golf."
I just submitted last week a new book to the editors. So I'm feeling that kind of void where I don't have that next challenge in
Oh,
that arena. And I'm really looking for what is that going to be? I'm looking for what is that? I hesitate to use the word challenge because it connotes the things I went through health wise and all,
right.
but I'm looking for that next opportunity. I'm really looking for that. I mean, I'm really open. I've shared that with a mastermind. I want to know, I'm open. What is that going to be? I want another mountain to climb.
So let me ask. So I'm a young sprite at 50 here,
Uh-huh.
and I'm going to claim I'm a young 50. And here you are at 73. One of the things I've questioned is we could talk about purpose, and it can still feel kind of self focused in some sense. But what about the responsibility? Because if you did that today, in all honesty, if you just stopped and said, I am just going to play golf. In all truth, I would look and go, seriously? Like you have nothing more to impart. You have no more legacy to give in your continued learning. Why would you not continue to learn, have new insights, have things to impart? And in that, do you feel a responsibility not to just go off and pleasure yourself? That's a loaded word, but
Yeah,
just to do that and coast,
totally. Oh,
coast.
I totally feel I would feel guilty in doing that. Now, again, I'm speaking for just me, but I heard John Maxwell talk one time years ago. I think he was referring to a younger brother of his who had been very successful in construction and had accumulated millions of dollars. And at like 43 years old, announced he never needed to work again because he had enough money. John says, "Oh, you can't do that. If God gave you the ability to make money, then you have the responsibility to continue using that gift to produce income, even if you don't need it personally.
Mm-hmm.
So then it can flow through you to other worthy kind of causes." And I really feel that just that whole idea of stewardship. If I know how to do something well, if I've proven my ability in a particular area, I struggle with just stopping.
Yeah.
Now I talked to Derek Sivers about a year ago. Derek was the young guy who developed the company CD Baby.
Mm-hmm.
So he just wanted to play his music, and he realized, none of the distribution, the big distributors would sell his CDs, and thought, well, I'm going to do it myself. So he figured out a way to do that. And then he had other friends saying, well, can you sell mine too? And so he grew a company, CD Baby, where he was selling his and his friends' music. And then a few years later, sold it for $22 million. Well, his goal was never to make a lot of money. His goal was to make good music and enjoy time with his friends. So he gave the money away, put it in a foundation, but anyway, it has no control or no access to that anymore, and went back to living the life of a simple musician. Kind of reminds me of the old story that we tell sometimes about the Mexican fisherman who, was he would get up in the morning, go out in his little boat, and about 10 o'clock in the morning, he'd come back in with all the fish he and his family needed. He'd have lunch with his family and friends, take a siesta, sit around in the afternoons, play his guitar with his amigos, and then had a smart Harvard trained MBA show up and said, "Cal, you catch all the fish you want by 10 o'clock? Yeah. You know what you could do? If you stay out there, till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you get more fish. You could start selling that to your friends around here. You could get a couple other boats, oversee them. You grow this empire. You move to Los Angeles." And at every point, the Mexican fisherman said, "And then what? And then what?" Well, and finally got to the point, well, then you'd have this big company. Then you'd sell your company and have all this money. You could come back to your town here, you get up in the morning, go out and fish a little because you enjoy it, spend time with your friends and amigos in the afternoon, strumming your guitar. And it was like, wait a minute, that's what I'm
Just
doing
came full
now.
circle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. And there are examples of that. But when you find something that you truly love, I mean, the whole idea of retirement, implies as soon as I can quit this thing that I'm doing now and do what I really enjoy, then my life will be great. Well, there's the key. What a novel idea. If you figure out what it is you really enjoy, you don't have that desire to move away from it. It's not all just about accumulating a lot of money. It's about having a meaningful life. And if that is, making $40,000 a year, then continue doing that. But there's no point that I can identify at which it makes sense to just stop what you're doing and force yourself, try to figure out how to do nothing. Doing nothing just defies everything we know about the human spirit.
Let's pick on your fisherman analogy, which I adore the story and the analogy. Dave Ramsey would look at that and go, well, that's great until the day comes that he can't get out there and fish and he doesn't have any stored up
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
that. Because it does draw us into when we talk about retirement, and I'm going to, again, I'm picking here. The expectation that the day is going to come when you are still alive, but you are not physically able to produce
Uh-huh.
or mentally able these days. And now
Ooh, wait, okay.
what?
Well, you just threw in a big caveat there because not physically able. I'm in one of those spaces where I'm not laying railroad ties where my body wears out. I'm not able to do that. To be able to write, think, speak, talk, coach. I mean, wow, those are things that I can do even if I'm incapacitated or pretty weak physically. But if you throw that in where I'm not mentally able, yeah, that throws in that's a whole different wrench.
So that again, we're not, so back to the fisherman, it's not to say that we're not working to store things up, but I'm picking at and pushing against and questioning that expectation that we have. I think, especially in America, that we are going to get to the point. I'm 50 and I've got peers saying, well, I just can't do what I used to do, which is a very cultural American thing that we're now quickly disabled physically at younger and younger ages. So now we're in a health issue. This wasn't necessarily a health talk, but I'm looking at those things that cause our expectations about where we're going to be at 73
Mhm.
years old. You need to have finances set because you're going to be disabled and have to take care of yourself. And you're going to retire because you surely want to quit that thing that you've been having to grind away at. I mean, we've got
Mhm.
two things that we now believe to be truths. They are realities that are going to happen. And you're looking at both, are looking at both of those and saying, well, no, I'm not going to accept that. One, I'm not going to do a job that I want to retire from, spend my life toiling away at something that I don't like to try to get away from it. One, and you are doing the work. Now you said, yeah, you're not laying railroad ties, but you just went through a significant health ordeal and made significant lifestyle changes to bolster your physical and mental ability so that you can not accept the norm.
Yeah,
Fair?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. There are a lot of people who would have taken that challenge that I had in the health arena and just said, okay, it's time to just slow down.
Yeah.
Just not, I'm like, how can I not get back to normal? As you know, working with your friend and functional medicine doctor that I worked with, not to get back to normal, but get back to better than I've ever been.
Mhm.
That was my goal, to have more stamina, more energy than I had had in the previous 20 years. I mean, that was my goal. And that's how I approach this. I'm not looking for when I can have an excuse to slow down. And I don't want to justify just being busy. That's not the point, but it comes back to meaningful, fulfilling purpose.
Well, and you're not. If I look at, if we go back and look at where you were at 50, my age, you were busy.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, you were completely busy. And I would say for the most part, I am too. You do not live that style of busy life today, even though your production may be just as high or higher because you've learned to work smarter, but you are enjoying, I mean, you are enjoying the fruits of your labor.
Yes.
You didn't toil away at a job you want to retire from, but now you have the luxury of, in essence, whether you want to work or not today, next week, whatever you want to do, you're gainfully employed. You've got a team of folks that help and you enjoy. We took a couple hour lunch today and, take a nap and we'll go out this evening. So the hours of work are less. The pace is
Hmm.
slower. What?
Yeah. I still consider a good week 50 hours
Mm.
of work. I'm not looking in any way to get down to Tim Ferriss's 4 hours a week. not at all. In reality, as you know, Tim's not either. He's hustling as well,
Right.
but
It's a good
but
book though.
I'm not. I'm
It sold well.
yeah, I did. I'm not looking to just reduce everything that I'm doing. I want to be full speed. I mean, my I I want to write the chapter to my next book, in the morning and go to my funeral that afternoon.
Mhm.
I don't intend to have much gap in between there.
Well, now I want to go back to that aspect of legacy comes out a lot as I hear from men specifically, because that's who I tend to hang out with in their older age. What is the legacy? What are they going to impart? I like that word. What am I going to impart? And to that, I do feel like, what am I going to get to the point? Do I have I'm going to use strong words, the right, the responsibility to just stop and coast, to just say, no, I'm going to, I've earned the right to, I paid my dues or whatever. One, I don't feel the responsibility. And two, I would be, again, bored out of I want the challenge. I want the purpose. And like you said, if anything, I'm fearful of boredom because is, it tends to equal decline.
It does. And out of boredom, people a lot of times sabotage meaningful things in their lives. We see people who have no incentive anymore to be engaged or create income, however we frame it, and they start making stupid decisions.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, they've destroyed relationships, their health, whatever. They're in a much different kind of position.
Do you have
That's a
anonymous
sad.
examples? I see you. I see you looking off at the distance at somebody.
Oh my.
Okay,
Yeah.
you don't have to
Well,
name
we
names.
could certainly take celebrities that we know or athletes that we know who, because they, or lottery winners, and we could certainly look at some kind of anonymous examples like that where people were certainly did not have the necessity to be productive anymore. And in doing so, made decisions that were very self-destructive.
It's interesting to me, and I'll try to be tactful with this, but I see, and again, I hang out with men primarily. So sorry for having examples there who have made a great business, made great income, doing something that made great income, selling a widget, let's just say. Nothing bad on it, but it wasn't the most purposeful thing, but they learned how to do it and they made money. Now they're at that point, and I do have names here that I won't name, and they don't need to make money anymore. And now they want legacy. They want something. Look back at that and they can point to the money and how it took care of their family and the
Mm-hmm.
adventures and whatever. But the thing in and of itself is not something they're overtly proud of, having devoted their lives to selling this widget, product, or service.
All right.
And now they do, I see them devote to trying to take that wisdom, take something and impart something that's going to be legacy worthy. I feel like I've seen a rash of that. Maybe it's just my age at this
Yeah.
point.
We went to, your mom and I went to a fundraiser a couple years ago. It was the first event in the Music City Center, the new fabulous building in Nashville. And at this fundraiser, there were people there from all over the country and really around the world. And it was fascinating talking to them because a lot of them have had access to resources that were just astounding. And they were looking for, what can I do that's meaningful? And I talked to a guy who had 6,000 acres over in Eastern Tennessee. And he was asking me, what could I do with this property that would somehow be meaningful? Rather than just subdividing it and 10 times my money, what could I do with this? And I love having those conversations with people who have access to resources and they're really struggling with the idea of, okay, how can I do something purposeful now with this so that I create a legacy? Yeah, I mean, if the guy created the hula hoop or the pet rock, and made a lot of money, but it's like, wow, that wasn't really something that changed the world in a positive way necessarily, but I made a lot of money. So what do I do next? I mean, these are woven together and give us reasons to get up and challenge ourselves to figure this out.
Well, and that's, again, that's the curiosity and what we're picking at with this show. That'd be a great mastermind of people in that stage and say, how can we use our resources to do something that does give legacy? And we're taking this and without judgment. I love that it's kind of the bother thing. We're saying the aspect of doing something worthwhile that does give purpose, that does give legacy and imparting is a good thing to do. And it also gives us the most joy because at the end of the day, we're all sitting there. We're talking to 70 year olds only. Who does not want to be fulfilled, to have purpose? And I don't think who would say, no, I'm done. I don't think anyone would, but we have this, again, cultural expectation of what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, and again, at my season of life, I do see a whole lot of examples of people who I can't pinpoint what the purpose is for them. They get up, geez, probably go to the doctor, go to lunch, play golf, drink too much. They seem to be accelerating their decline by the choices they're making because there's really not a whole lot that's expected of them or that they have defined that they're willing to give at that point.
Well, so there's two areas of counsel you and your 73 years of wisdom could impart here. One is to, I was going to say me, but we can go younger than me. We can go to the kid who's looking at what college he's going to go to, or what he's going to
Sure.
do there. And what would you tell them so that this is not even an issue? One, so you can speak to that, to where we're not living the life that they want to retire from and have to deal with purpose or lack thereof. So there's one demographic. The other one is the person that's hearing this that happens to be in their whatever 60s, or they could be my age, looking towards 60, looking towards
Hmm.
retirement age in
Hmm.
15 years or something like that. Or they're where you are and they have the resources and they're sitting there looking at boredom. Speak to both.
Well, to kind of frame this, you at 50, now I'm sure you remember most of these details, but I've always been an entrepreneur. So I've tried a lot of ideas. Some have worked pretty well, and a couple along the way have been kind of bummers.
Well, my story is always one year we're driving the Cadillac Eldorado, and the next year you're driving something really embarrassing. And I never
That's
knew
it.
which year that would be.
That's right. The life of an entrepreneur. So I went through this one period of time, and I was actually 41 years old when I found myself in a pretty untenable position. The bank I had kind of open-ended relationships with, handshake agreements with my buddies at the bank, changed ownership 3 times in 2 years, put me in a really tough spot. The bank putting pressure on me for these open lines of credit I had. I ended up selling the primary business I had at that point, a health and fitness center, thinking, well, I'll just walk all away with the shirt in my back. I'm an entrepreneur, no big deal. I'll come up with the next idea and do it. And yet woke up the next morning and discovered I was deeply in debt because of what the sale. I sold it at absolute auction, just sold it just to, I was finished with it, as entrepreneurs often do, but I ended up deeply in debt, almost $500,000 in debt, and wanted to honor my word. I wasn't going to just walk away from that. So I chose not to file bankruptcy. I had a mess with the IRS to unravel, and it took me a long time to get all of that sorted out. Now, that was in formative years of your growing up in the house. We continued to have great times in our family. We had fun nights at our family. Other kids would come in. We didn't go on fancy vacations. We changed a lot of things we were doing, but we continued to have love and support and a lot of fun in our family and all of that. But when I unwound all that, that fateful morning when I walked in my office and the fax machine peeled off 14 pages of IRS lien releases, and I had done some things to resolve all those other issues, and I realized I am absolutely, my net worth is zero. I mean, I was thrilled. I was ecstatic
At what age was
to
that?
recognize my net worth was back up to zero. I was 53 years old.
Yeah.
So everything I'm known for today, the writing speaking, see that the writing was not something I just contrived as a way to make a lot of money. It doesn't make sense. I mean, we know that most authors, 95% of authors, never make more than $40,000 a year.
Mhm.
That's not very appealing for somebody who has financial goals. But if that's really where I find my joy, if that's where I find the intersection of my passion and talent, then I'm going to do that and just figure out how difficult can it be to put myself in the 5% of those authors. So I use that. But as you know, my first writing experience was not that I sat down and said, I want to write a book. Your mom and I agreed to teach a Sunday school class. And we had people come. It was like a vacuum. They came from other states and other churches. Like, what are you people doing here? And it was not just the kid who lost his job at Burger King wondering how to get a job at the next place, but we had physicians, attorneys, dentists, pastors, engineers, accountants. I'm like, what are you guys doing here? Well, we're doing okay, but I don't think this is it. And it allowed me to see that void, to go deeper with these people. What is my purpose for being here? Not just how can I make a buck and pay the mortgage? What is my purpose here? So my writing evolved out of that. And now that turned into be my greatest path toward financial freedom, was moving into that space that showed up unexpectedly. And yet it scratched an itch in me, obviously, and helping me clarify my purpose and move forward from that. But I was 53 years old, flat broke, absolute zero net worth. So it's been, though I'm now 73, so it's been 20 years. It's been a great 20-year run. But what am I doing now? I'm planning the next 25 years, because it's that old adage, and I'm part of Strategic Coach. You know, Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, says that when you have more behind you than you have ahead of you, you're done. You again told your body you can start shutting down.
Mm.
If you have more to look back on than you have to look ahead toward, you're finished. I'm planning the next 25 years. And that doesn't mean that I'm just planning until I get there. I'm always planning 25 years out. That's 100 quarters. So I work in those, quarters, 4 quarters a year. There's 125 years. So I'm always looking, what am I going to do this next quarter? So I'm always anticipating the next stage of that 25-year span. Man, that keeps me going. I don't know if I answered your question there, but I
Well,
hopefully
I'm going to continue on with it, but somebody that I probably had one of the shows talked about, or was in their book about the increased proliferation of people who now at earlier and early ages talk about who they used to be and what they used to do, just to what you said there, and how scary. I mean, it's kind of back to back in the glory days. I think, oh my goodness, I don't have a day more glorious than today. Oh, and I expect it just to get better. But what a death knell that would be. Well, so in that light, to talk to the younger generation, which I know you talk to this every day, but we're seeing that it's obviously it's common knowledge to you that's not common in the culture. And I don't, we talked about Chris Tuff, your buddy, the millennial whisperer, and I
yeah.
don't have a pulse on the younger generation. In my kids, I get to program differently, but I do have to do that in relation to what's happening, out there somewhat. And I know that the millennials are seeming to be a lot less tolerant of just looking forward and saying, I'm just going to grind it out like my parents did
Oh,
in some
yeah.
job.
Yes, indeed. They are less tolerant.
They are, but I don't know that that's leading to good outcomes at the moment, is it? I mean, are they finding work with more joy? Are they getting in touch with that thing that scratches an itch that will have a more long term?
Well, I like to think they are. I may be optimistically thinking, but I really like to think that they are. Um, I don't think, we're raising kids who are just selfish. I think there's a lot of kids, when we look at the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So at the bottom you have safety and security, and then you have belonging, self-esteem, and it moves all the way up to self-actualization or even transcendence. But self-actualization, where you're really in your zone of genius. And the assumption is, and was by Maslow, and a lot of people have accepted that over the years, that until you have each of those steps fulfilled, you can't move to the next one. So if you're concerned about where you're going to sleep tonight, you aren't worried about purpose and fulfillment and meaning. You're worried about how to find a place to sleep tonight and how to have enough to eat. But you know what? We're seeing a lot of millennials who really reverse that. They turn that pyramid on its head. They want to do something worthwhile, something noble, something that's going to change the world, even if they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. They're not concerned about having a Mercedes in the driveway and a white picket fence, on a mortgage, a $500,000 mortgage. That's not their goal at all. So they're approaching it much differently, which kind of goes back to some of the earlier things we talked about. And they're not looking to just store up enough that they have enough. They're looking, how can I really create clean water in the world, or show people better permaculture? How can we value the planet. I mean, how can we travel to outer space? There's all kinds of things that they're involved in that don't seem to make sense in just in terms of making a living, but they're involved in something they consider very purposeful.
Are you seeing that also in line with them knowing or getting more in touch maybe than your generation with the things that are true to them, their nature, the even if they go through the what's the average careers people go through these days? It's
Well, the average job is about 2.3, but the average career, you're going to have 4 or 5 typically. And that's okay. And yeah, I am seeing people because these younger generations are looking at mom and dad and saying, oh my gosh, dad put in 27 years at his company grinding things out. And then he showed up one morning. They told him he had 30 minutes to clean out his desk. I'm not going to make myself vulnerable to that. So they know there's no loyalty or security from the companies. They're saying, I'll just chart my own course. And frankly, that oftentimes leads them to find a more authentic path. In the book, The Millionaire Next Door, Dr. Thomas Stanley, talked about who is it that really hits it out of the park. And what he discovered, even in financial terms, is that the average millionaire out there had a GPA of 2.7. Well, how's that possible? We're taught get a 4.0. That's going to give you the best advantages. But what happens is somebody with a 4.0, they're going to get invitations to graduate school. They're going to get invitations to law school, to medical school, to seminary, to pharmacology, or whatever. Guess what happens to the dude with the 2.7? He doesn't get those invitations. So he has to figure something out. And a lot of times they figure something out that's a better fit for them that they really can sink their teeth into than somebody who simply had the academic ability to keep going to school.
well, and as you know, I never wanted if I could have gotten those doors, I didn't want those. I remember telling you the day when I realized I have no desire to go to college, and you said, totally fine.
Mhm,
There will be some doors you won't open, like you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a pharmacologist or whatever, and all things that I had no desire
mhm.
to be. And that's 30 years ago, that discussion, and yet today, and now we don't need to go down the college road. I know there's a lot of turmoil with that, thanks to I must say thanks to COVID kind of bringing that more.
Mhm.
Like it's still so much of the expectation as opposed to what you led us as kids, and I'm working to lead my kids in and knowing who are you, what are you good at, what are your propensities, what are the things that come easy to you. You said you've used the word your genius
Yes.
a few times, and if I can get them into that, why would they ever? Well, then there's the title of your book, 48 Days to the Work You Love. Why would you retire from that? Even if we need another word of you haven't retired, but you have earned the ability to slow down, do other things, expand, uh, whatnot. But that's not a retiring. Um,
Yeah, we do need another word to kind of fill that in because there's lifestyle changes that I've made, especially with this move that your mom and I made to Florida. There we were on 9 acres of property. I was out on my tractor almost every day. There were things that need to be done, limbs that need to be picked up, trees need to be hauled away, rocks that I wanted to move for new landscaping areas. I always well, I'm not doing that anymore. That's a big chunk of time
yeah.
and a big chunk of physical activity that was increasingly difficult for me, no question about it. So I've changed things in terms of what my daily routine looks like, what my weekly routine looks like, for sure. But the primary things that really give me the most sense of joy, fulfillment, and purpose have not changed at all.
Okay, so I'm playing with it here, and I'm thinking, how about you? You graduated. You didn't retire. No, I
Yeah.
graduated, or even you mentioned school. You now have in your self-employed vocational life. You now have tenure. You're not going to get fired.
There you
You're not
go.
going to run out of
I
money.
have tenure.
but you-
Yeah.
but I'm still working. I'm still producing. The best works may be yet to come.
I hope so. I really believe that. I really, I mean, that's what keeps me awake at night sometimes, is because I want to do more productive, more meaningful work in the next 25 years than I've done in the last 25.
And you're prime not to. You had a book. What are we going to call it? A hallmark, an evergreen book, 48 Days of the Work You Love, that's been selling well for what are we at?
It's now in
20,
its 20th. year edition.
20th year that is established your kingdom in so many ways
Yeah.
that you could say, hey, I
Brand,
knocked
strong
it out of the
brand.
park. I now have tenure.
Yes.
Thanks to that. Don't have to do anything. You can go play golf.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, because that was so successful, it opened the door, publishers knocking on my door for other kind of books in that same space. No More Mondays, Wisdom Meets Passion, Rudder of the Day, Right to the Bank, those kind of things. But this newest book that I just submitted to the editors is very, very different. It's not just coattailing on that to see if I can milk that a little bit more. It's very much a different direction than what people have grown accustomed to expecting from me. I am so excited about that. Now, I don't know, I'm not really trying to anticipate a bigger success in terms of book sales and all of that. I really don't think so, because I think it's going to speak to a smaller number of people. It's much more philosophical and spiritual. The title is An Understanding Heart. It's compiled of just short segments that I've written. So it's not even like one continuous theme. It's 91 short segments that I put together for this book. But I'm more excited about it because I think in some ways I've moved more from head to heart. I think that's one of the privileges of aging, that graduating is that we get to do that. We can follow our heart more than just what my head's telling me has to be done.
Hmm. Donald Miller, who you know well, and I just had on a Ziegler Show and a Motive podcast as well. And I was questioning him now that he's gone in. I mean, he's been in this business realm for a while, but I went back. I fell in love with his writing and his perspective back with his memoirs, which I think there was 8. And I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, there's a lot of people that are going, oh my gosh, will you please come out with another one? We want that's like somebody wanting the next Stephen King book. Can we get
Right.
another one?" And he said, I kind of it ran its course.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot of insight. I'm kind of now I'm here, and then that's when he talked about, and now I'm in this business realm, and I already see Act 3 of
Mhm.
political
Mhm.
activacy and what tenure graduating has allowed him, because he has had a wildly successful business now, writing career and creating a business where I don't think income is a big issue at this point. But he's able to spread that, man. He's so excited, and he's my age. He's
I would think
about
so.
50,
Yeah.
something like that. So to see you going into you've graduated to where you can now.
Yeah, I'm anticipating a new season. We not only move geographically, but I anticipate a new season, not less active, no, but just a new season. And that ought to, I want new challenges, new opportunities, new ideas. I'm anticipating. I don't want to just ride the coattails of what had been done. And a lot of times in our culture, that's kind of the pattern. Well, I figured this out, so I'm just going to do it for 30 years and then I'm finished.
Well, but it's a structure that we have. So you went to high school, got your 4.0, got a scholarship, got into this, spent 4 years getting this degree. And then if you did one of the specialties, lawyer, doctor, whatever, you put that much in. Now you've got to recoup, you got to get an ROI on
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
and go down that road. And yeah, same thing. It feels, even to me, it feels a little bit, even though I think I should know better, it feels like that. Man, I put so much into that. Really, I'm going to veer over here and not get the advantage of that. But then Dan Miller, 48 days to the work you love, would say, no, that benefit can be transferred, that learning, that wisdom, that investment. Is that fair to?
Yeah, you really stuck your toe in another big area there. I did go to college, and I did that as a way to escape the farm more than I did to define a career path. I got my degree in psychology, not because I had any desire to be a counselor or a therapist, but because it was a process of personal exploration. So I've always seen academics as just a structured way to know more about myself so I can be more effective, more authentic about who I am. Not that it gives me a piece of paper that's going to give me a job somewhere. Interesting. You talked about, graduating, even the academic path I chose. I did then get a traditional master's degree as well, master's in clinical psychology. Again, with no desire to work as a psychologist. It just was the next stepping stone to a fulfilling life. I kept exploring it with entrepreneurial ideas. And then 18 years after finishing my master's degree, then I started working my doctoral program. And a doctoral program that I chose was, through Oxford. So I would go back and forth to England, but it had nothing to do with preparing myself for a different career. It was just more the enjoyment of personal study and understanding and helping me convey the principles that hopefully help other people find this authentic path of purpose.
Is it fair for us to land on this, to be at 73, not wanting to retire from a life of doing something that was just the toil to make a buck, which it seems most things are still focused on, is the money aspect, even retirement age, that to do that, to not do that, uh, is to, we're back to, I mean, you have a book, passions, wisdom meets passion, but then your program, passion meets profits. Is that the program? I can't remember. You had on passion. Um,
I'm not sure.
I'm blanking on it, but pursuing passion being the point, finding that thing
right.
that you care about above the dollar,
Mm-hmm.
even while you have to make a dollar. I mean, I'm 50 years old with a house full of kids,
Right.
and still have a dollar. But I'm back to that question of, would I be doing what I'm doing today, or what aspects of it would I be doing if I did not need the dollar
Mm-hmm.
as a result? And if I'm doing that, yeah, why would I retire? And because what I think I'm wanting to lay out, and it wasn't a talk on retirement necessarily, but if I'm going to be 73 and have fulfillment, have joy in my day, not be declining. That's the one that gets me the most, the expectation of decline. Mm-hmm. Mental, physical, interest, purpose, everything. And we see that. And why on earth would we do that? One, and when I look at my family, I just don't feel the free. It feels irresponsible to me, even getting to the health aspect. And then I'm going to be drooling dad in the corner, grandpa, that they have to take care of and be a burden on. And it's this expectation that we've come to that's not making anybody happy.
But at the end of the day, we all have choices. Wow. They're all the old expectations have been kind of wiped out. We see the futility of trying to get the right job and staying there for 35 years. It's not going to happen. That would be totally unrealistic. So all those old expectations and norms have been kind of wiped out. It forces us then to come up with, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, what do we tell somebody who's approaching college today when we see thousands of kids out here with degrees in political science and English lit and things like that, and they owe $120,000? They have no marketable skills, no place
They
for
served
them.
me my Starbucks this morning.
There you go. They do. And now we have, and now we have Google, who just 3 weeks ago announced their certification programs and things like data analysis. And they've got 3 programs right now and are adding totally. Here's the deal. It takes 6 months to complete one of their certification programs. It costs $240. And they have 130 companies who have already signed on saying, we'll hire anybody you send us who comes through with one of those certifications. What's it going to, I mean, those kind of decisions are rocking the world of how you're going to help your kids who are approaching being teenagers and then going up. I mean, their decisions, I mean, we can't even imagine some of the things that they'll do for meaningful, fulfilling work, things we can't even identify yet at this point. Things are changing so quickly, but that's okay. Yeah. If we give them the tools to really look internally and understand themselves. I mean, even back in the original version of 48 Days to the Work You Love, I said 85% of the process of having the confidence of proper direction comes from looking inward. It's not looking out externally or what the circumstances are, what the economy is, or who's in the White House right now, what trends there are, what franchises are hot. Those are all external things. Those are part of the 15%. That 85% still comes back to look inward, figure out how God has uniquely gifted you, boom, you can nail this thing and walk forward in
So right
confidence.
there with that flavor, let's land on that one for the person who is nearing or at retirement age and is struggling with this aspect of purpose. I'll never forget the guy that you coached, executive coaching. He was at a big company back in Tennessee, and merger, whatever, laid off. And he said, I have no idea what to do for, you know, the story, 20 years or so. I had pencil up and head down.
26 years, head down, pencil up. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And didn't know transferable skills, whatever. But back to what you said, was not self-aware. He knew how to do the job. He'd spent the time knowing how to do the job, not self-aware. So now we have people out there, they've done that. We can't go back and erase time. That's truth. It is. And now here they are.
Mhm.
What hope, direction would you give to them to find some purpose now?
The same I would give to a 18-year-old who is at the beginning of this process. What are your skills and abilities? And the cool thing is, it's easier to get clarity on this when you're 65, if we want to choose that time frame, than it is when you're 18, because you have the luxury of life experience to help you look back and see those patterns that have emerged. When was it that you really felt like you were in your zone? You know, how do you relate to other people? What kind of environment you most comfortable in? How do you manage? How do you persuade? You know, what are those unique skills and abilities, not only that you can do, but that you enjoy doing and would like to continue doing? And then what are your personality tendencies? What are those recurring values, dreams, and passions? And from that, you can get a clear focus. And this is a process you can do in 2 hours. This is not something where you have to go, to the desert for 3 years. No, you can sit down and do it and look at yourself. But that's the process.
Yeah.
And if somebody unexpectedly has been forced into retirement, they got their bonus check and are retired, lost their job, and they're wondering what that's going to be, it's still the same process. Look inward, and there ought to be plenty of clues there to help you get a clear focus. What do you want the next 20 years to look like?
We're kind of back to that, what we talked about a little bit ago, of regardless of if you're 70 years old and your resources are $100 million from company X, or it's a lifetime of doing head down, pencil up, that there's still resources. So here we are. What resources do you have? What can you do with them?
And it's in it, yeah, whether you're that dude who has $100 million stashed away, or you reach retirement and don't really have a lot of resources, or you're the 18-year-old wondering what to do, or the 22-year-old wondering, gee, I got a fresh college degree. What the process is the same. It is that same process. Sit down, look at yourself, look at what your life experience has already told you, see the patterns that are emerging there, and hold your head high and walk into the next season of your life, knowing that today more than ever, we have the opportunity to turn those things we know about ourselves into meaningful, purposeful, and profitable work.